If you lost your calm for just 5 seconds today, would you survive like a medieval peasant did? In a world without alarms, without 911, without even a locked door between you and danger, people had to rely on the oldest defense system known to humankind, awareness. Imagine a narrow medieval street at dusk. The rain has turned the dirt road to mud, and every step splashes cold water against your legs. From the tavern ahead drifts the sound of laughter, metal mugs clinking, a lute playing somewhere behind thick oak doors. The smell of smoke and roasted meat fills the air. You'd think it was peaceful, safe. But in those days, peace was a disguise, and safety depended on your eyes, not your walls. People back then didn't stroll through life distracted. They scanned the world the way modern soldiers scan a battlefield. Every time someone entered a tavern, their mind ran through a silent checklist. Where are the exits? Who's standing too close to them? Which stranger looks restless, watching instead of drinking? What objects could turn into protection if things turned bad? It wasn't taught in a school. It was learned by watching who didn't come home. Awareness wasn't a talent. It was the price of survival. When a medieval traveler walked down a road, they didn't just listen for footsteps. They listened for silence. Because silence often meant trouble. Birds suddenly quiet. A barking dog that stopped too soon. Horses stamping nervously at nothing. Those were the alarms of the Middle Ages, and people who ignored them rarely got a second chance. They didn't have sensors or guards. Their security systems had fur and feathers. A dog's low growl under the table. A horse flicking its ears toward the woods. A crow flying off too quickly. Small things, but they meant everything. A medieval farmer could read the tension in a forest like you read a text message. They knew when the air changed. They knew when a night was too still. And that kind of attention, that razor-edge focus, saved more lives than any weapon ever could. Now think about how easy it is today to forget the world around us. Headphones in. Eyes on screens. The modern human walks blind through places full of signals. Back then, distraction killed you. People built a sixth sense for patterns. They noticed when something broke routine, when the neighbor's door stayed closed too long, or when the tavern grew quiet at the wrong moment. The biggest danger wasn't the sword or the dagger. It was the moment you believed you were safe. Counting coins where others could see them. Drinking too much after sunset. Traveling alone through the woods. Those weren't random mistakes. They were invitations. Predators didn't appear from nowhere. They watched, waited, studied habits. They knew who left early, who carried money, who always took the same path home. That's why the smart ones became unpredictable. They changed their routes, changed their rhythm, kept their movements irregular so no one could plan against them. Every survivor carried two weapons, their instinct and their observation. A sharp sword helped, but a sharper mind mattered more. Even inside their homes, people stayed alert. Before going to bed, they made sure heavy objects sat near the door. A stool, a pot, a walking staff. Not because they expected a fight every night, but because they refused to be unprepared for one. A medieval parent taught their children early. Keep your eyes open, your mouth closed, and your hands ready. You didn't survive by being fearless. You survived by noticing before fear had a chance to start. The poor learned it on dark roads. The rich learned it behind castle walls. Everyone, from shepherds to knights, understood that danger loves comfort. The moment you relaxed, it arrived. So awareness became a habit, a silent ritual repeated hundreds of times a day. Step into a room, scan it. Hear laughter, separate genuine joy from tension. Smell smoke, decide if it's dinner or disaster. Every sense worked together like a living compass pointing toward safety. And if your instincts whispered, something's off, you listened. Because back then, ignoring that voice could be the last mistake you ever made. When trouble finally found them, medieval people didn't freeze, they transformed. They didn't have training gyms or instructors shouting commands. What they had was desperation, and desperation breeds creativity. A walking stick wasn't a decoration. It was a promise. Every traveler carried one. Carved from solid oak, polished by years of hands gripping it on muddy trails. It looked harmless, even kind, but in an instant, That same stick could shatter a skull or knock a blade from an attacker's hand. A single swing meant survival. Nobody suspected the old man with the cane until it was too late. In towns and villages, ordinary life disguised hidden genius. A blacksmith's hammer, a baker's peel, a farmer's shovel. All simple tools that could become brutal weapons when pushed to the edge. The medieval kitchen, more than any armory, was where survival was forged. An iron pan swung with conviction hit harder than any sword. A ladle, a broom handle, even a heavy jug of ale could make the difference between escape and death. They understood that almost anything could save your life if you learned to see it differently. It wasn't about strength. It was about speed, surprise, and timing. Attackers expected blades and shields. They never expected a skillet to the ribs or a cloak thrown into their eyes. Confusion was power. Hesitation a weapon of its own. Medieval homes were built with that philosophy. Chairs weren't just for resting. Tables weren't only for meals. A heavy bench flipped sideways turned into instant cover. A cloak hung near the door wasn't just decoration. It was defense within reach. Even belts, thick, worn leather, could wrap around a wrist, trip a leg, or choke off danger long enough to run. And running was not shameful. It was wisdom. It was the ultimate tactic that every survivor mastered. Because no fight is fair when it comes uninvited, and no victory matters if you don't make it home to tell the story. Markets were especially dangerous. Crowded, noisy, unpredictable. But the same chaos that created danger also offered protection. When fights broke out, vendors flipped their stalls, rolled barrels into streets, blocked alleys with carts. It wasn't random panic, it was instinctive architecture. They turned the marketplace into a fortress within seconds. People ducked behind wagons, formed circles with their backs together, and shouted to confuse attackers. Noise became a shield. A sudden roar from 10 terrified merchants could sound like a small army. Fear is contagious, yes, but so is courage when it echoes. Even castles, with their thick stone walls, were designed for defense that went beyond weapons. Narrow staircases twisted clockwise so right-handed intruders couldn't swing freely. Doorways were short, forcing attackers to bow as they entered, exposing their necks for a defender's strike. Every corner, every hallway, every uneven stone had a purpose: to slow, to trap, to buy time. In the countryside, peasants used nature itself as protection. Muddy fields became traps. Streams created barriers. Tall grass and hedges became allies for anyone who knew how to disappear among them. Shepherds knew which paths curved just enough to break a pursuer's line of sight. Farmers knew which walls to climb, which fences to knock over behind them. They didn't call it strategy, they called it living another day. And while modern minds admire courage, medieval people worshipped cleverness. They believed that surviving without a fight was the highest victory of all. Why break bones and risk blood feuds when you could win with fear alone? That's why intimidation became an art. A deep shout in the night, a horn blast echoing through the valley, or the rhythmic stomp of boots. These sounds turned small groups into terrifying forces. Guards had a code. 1 horn meant, "I'm awake." 2 meant, "I see you." 3 meant, "You're about to regret this." Most attackers didn't wait to find out if the third was true. And when intimidation failed, they used misdirection. Throw sand into the air. Kick over a basket of fruit. Drop a cloak behind you to make an attacker stumble. In those few confused seconds, you ran. And if you ran smart, you lived. Medieval escape wasn't random sprinting. It was choreography born from instinct. People memorized every alley, every shortcut, every doorway that led to another street. They knew where rooftops connected, which stairs creaked, and which walls had loose stones they could climb. It was a dance between chaos and control, rehearsed by generations who refused to die easy. Sometimes even knights, proud, armored, disciplined, knew when to vanish. They carried coins stitched into their belts to bribe guards or open gates quietly. Because pride can't stop a blade, but humility might save your life. Medieval people were practical, not heroic. They didn't chase danger. They managed it. They used sound, space, and surprise the way we use passwords and cameras today. Their world was sharper, darker, and far less forgiving. But their awareness, their adaptability, and their willingness to bend instead of break, that's what kept them alive. Every cup, every bench, every tool in their world had two meanings. One for peace, one for survival. They lived ready, and that readiness, that calm intelligence under pressure, was the real armor of the Middle Ages. When fear finally came, and it always did, medieval people didn't run from it. They expected it. They prepared for it the same way they sharpened blades or patched roofs. Because fear in their world wasn't the enemy. It was a companion, one that whispered warnings before the storm arrived. Every human body reacts the same way to danger. The heart speeds up, breathing shortens, hands shake. For most, that's panic. For them, it was a signal. The body is ready. More blood, more oxygen, more strength. The trick was never to silence the fear, but to guide it. Monks trained warriors and guards in what we now call breathing control. For counts in, hold for 4, for counts out. Simple rhythm, repeated in the dark before every patrol. It slowed the heart, cleared the mind, and kept hands steady. Some said it was prayer. Others said it was science before science had a name. Either way, it worked. Knights used something else, visualization. They would lie awake at night, armor resting beside them, eyes closed, rehearsing battles in their minds. They imagined the enemy's attack, the weight of their sword, the rhythm of their own steps. They fought dozens of invisible battles long before the real one began. So when danger came, it didn't feel new. Felt remembered. They also had mantras, short, sharp phrases repeated under pressure like heartbeats. Eyes up, feet steady, strike and move. Live first, win later. Those few words were enough to bring a trembling mind back into focus. They didn't need motivation, they needed control. Fear didn't vanish, transformed. It became energy, speed, precision. And once they learned to ride it instead of fighting it, even ordinary peasants could do extraordinary things. Because in truth, survival wasn't about muscle or weapons. It was about clarity. The clarity to see what others miss, to feel what others ignore, to act one heartbeat faster than the danger approaching. Knights knew this. So did the shepherds on the hills, the widows guarding their homes, the merchants traveling with bags of coin. They all lived by one rule: stay calm when others break. In villages, families practiced what they called rally points. If chaos came, a fire, a raid, a mob, everyone knew where to meet. The big oak behind the well, or the church gate, or the stone bridge by the river. No shouting, no searching, no panic. Just movement, coordination without words. They didn't have radios. They had trust and preparation. City guards trained in small groups, knowing 2 sets of eyes were worth more than 1 sword. They watched in pairs, patrolled in teams, moved in rhythm. One looked forward, the other scanned the shadows behind. Simple, ancient teamwork that saved lives again and again. Even in combat, they learned to move like a circle, backs together, eyes outward. When everyone faced a different direction, no one could be surprised. That formation, repeated through centuries, still exists today in modern tactics. But they didn't invent it for glory. They invented it because dying alone was useless. Living together meant everything. And when things turned violent, they had one final secret: restraint. They didn't always strike to kill. Because in a world ruled by blood feuds, a dead enemy meant angry brothers, angry cousins, angry sons. A live one meant peace, or at least the chance of it. Wooden training swords, blunt but heavy, were perfect for ending a fight without ending a life. A single strike to the head, a twist of the wrist, a trip, enough to stop violence without becoming its prisoner. They understood something we've forgotten. Stopping danger isn't the same as destroying it. Sometimes mercy is the most tactical move of all. And when all else failed, when they were outnumbered, exhausted, surrounded, they remembered the oldest rule of survival: move. Never stand still. Never stay where the fear finds you. Run toward the next breath, the next heartbeat, the next sunrise. Because surviving in the medieval world wasn't just luck or strength. It was rhythm, awareness, creativity. It was learning to see the world not as it looked, but as it warned. And that's what made them dangerous. Not their swords, not their armor, but their minds calm, sharp, and untamed. They lived in a time when everything around them could kill them: hunger, war, disease, betrayal. Yet through it all, they carried the same ancient lesson that still matters today. See first, act fast, stay alive, because the greatest weapon of the Middle Ages wasn't forged in steel. It was built inside the human spirit.